The morning I discovered my husband's betrayal, the coffee maker was broken. Such a small detail, but somehow it felt like the universe was preparing me for what was to come. I stood there in our kitchen in suburban Minneapolis, staring at the machine that had faithfully served us for 15 years, and felt an inexplicable chill run down my spine. Little did I know that in just a few moments, my entire world would shatter into pieces so small, I'd spend the next 18 months trying to figure out how to put them back together, or if I even wanted to. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband Michael's affair, how I slowly and methodically planned my response, and how on one fateful Christmas morning, I revealed everything I had done and watched his carefully constructed lies crumble around him. But more than that, this is a story about finding strength in the darkest moments, about the complex emotions that come with betrayal, and about the unexpected journey of rediscovering who you are when the person you trusted most becomes a stranger. Michael and I met in college in 1999. I was 19, studying elementary education at the University of Minnesota, and he was this charming business major who quite literally swept me off my feet when I tripped walking into our shared economics class. The irony wasn't lost on me years later that our relationship began with me falling and ended with him being the one to fall, though in an entirely different way. I remember our early days with a bittersweet clarity now. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Ambitious, funny, attentive in ways that made my friends jealous. He'd leave little notes in my textbooks, bring me hot chocolate during late-night study sessions, and look at me like I was the only person in the room even when we were at crowded campus parties. When he proposed on graduation day, getting down on one knee right after I received my diploma, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. We built what I believed was a beautiful life together, a colonial-style home in Eden Prairie with a wraparound porch where I imagined our future children would play. 2 daughters came along exactly as we'd planned. Emma in 2007, all dark curls and her father's stubborn streak, and Olivia in 2011, my gentle soul who could spend hours reading under the old oak tree in our backyard. I taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, while Michael climbed the corporate ladder at a medical supply company. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, stable, happy, or so I thought. The first crack in our foundation appeared in October 2019, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Michael had injured his back during what was supposed to be a simple weekend project, attempting to renovate our basement rec room. He'd always been the type who insisted on doing everything himself, too proud to hire help, too stubborn to admit when something was beyond his capabilities. The herniated disc that resulted required surgery and months of physical therapy. During those long weeks of recovery, I watched my strong, independent husband struggle with the simplest tasks, and something shifted between us. I tried to be supportive. Really, I did. But between teaching 25 8-year-olds all day, managing our household, driving Michael to appointments, helping our daughters with homework, and dealing with my own mother's declining health, I was overwhelmed. I'm not proud of the moments when my patience wore thin, when I sighed a little too loudly while helping him tie his shoes, or when I snapped at him for leaving his medication bottles scattered across the nightstand. Caregiving is hard, harder than anyone tells you, and I wasn't always the wife I wanted to be during those months. It was during this time that I made a friend at work who would unknowingly change everything. Marcus Chen had joined our school as the new PE teacher that fall, 28 years old, fresh out of graduate school with innovative ideas about children's fitness, and an enthusiasm that made even the most reluctant kids want to participate. He was everything Michael wasn't at that moment: energetic, optimistic, physically capable. When he offered to help with the school's after-hours wellness program for teachers, I found myself signing up without really thinking about it. At first, it was innocent, just a group of us teachers doing yoga and light cardio after school twice a week. Marcus was professional, encouraging without being condescending, and genuinely interested in our well-being. He had this way of making everyone feel seen and valued, remembering little details about our lives and checking in on how we were doing beyond just the physical exercise. When I mentioned Michael's injury and how stressed I was, he listened with an empathy that I hadn't felt from anyone in months. The shift from innocent to something more was so gradual I almost didn't notice it happening. Coffee after our workout sessions turned into longer conversations. Text messages about school events became personal check-ins throughout the day. When he suggested we grab dinner after a particularly stressful parent-teacher conference in November, I told myself it was just two colleagues decompressing. But sitting across from him at that little Thai restaurant, laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in months, I felt something awaken inside me that I thought had died. I want to be clear about something. I'm not trying to justify what happened next. There is no justification for betrayal, no excuse that makes it acceptable. But I think it's important to understand how these things happen, how a good person can make terrible choices when they're vulnerable, and someone offers them everything they feel they're missing. Marcus made me feel young again, desired, interesting beyond my role as wife and mother and caregiver. When he first kissed me in the empty school parking lot after our workout in early December, I didn't stop him. And that single moment of weakness became the first in a long series of choices that would eventually destroy everything I held dear. The affair lasted 14 months. 14 months of lies, secret meetings, and a double life that required constant vigilance to maintain. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look my husband in the eye and lie about working late. Who could come home and help my daughters with homework while still feeling Marcus's touch on my skin. The guilt was overwhelming at times, but the addiction to how he made me feel was stronger. I told myself Michael was emotionally absent anyway, that our marriage had been dying long before his injury, that I deserved to be happy. The mental gymnastics required to justify betrayal are exhausting, but I became an expert at them. What I didn't know was that Michael had noticed. While I thought I was being careful, deleting texts, showering before coming home, maintaining just enough affection to avoid suspicion, he was watching, documenting, planning. He later told me that he'd started suspecting something was wrong in January 2020, just 2 months into my affair. My behavior had changed in subtle ways. I was protective of my phone, distant, despite trying to act normal, putting more effort into my appearance for work. These were all classic signs I would have recognized if I hadn't been so caught up in my own deception. The pandemic should have ended things with Marcus. When schools went virtual in March 2020, I thought the forced separation would give me the clarity to end the affair and recommit to my marriage. Instead, it only made things more complicated. As an essential worker in medical supplies, Michael still went to the office, giving me hours of privacy I shouldn't have had. Video calls with Marcus replaced physical meetings, and somehow the emotional connection deepened even as the physical distance increased. We created an entire relationship that existed in stolen moments and digital spaces, a fantasy that felt more real than my actual life. Michael's recovery progressed, and by April he was back to most of his normal activities. But instead of bringing us closer together, his renewed independence seemed to create even more distance. He started working late hours, something he'd never done in 20 years of marriage. He'd come home at unexpected times, disappear for weekend hours without clear explanations, and most unnervingly, he seemed completely unbothered by my own absences. When I tried to gauge his feelings, asking if he was upset about my schedule or if something was wrong, he'd just look at me with this unreadable expression and change the subject. The paranoia began creeping in slowly. Was he suspicious? Did he know? Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl, but when I'd ask what he was thinking, he'd just smile and say nothing. He changed all his passwords, something we'd never done in our entire marriage. When I questioned it, he cited security concerns with the same casual tone I'd used when I'd done the same thing months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I couldn't exactly complain without being hypocritical. By summer of 2020, I was living in a constant state of anxiety. Marcus was pushing for more, talking about our future together, about me leaving Michael. The fantasy was colliding with reality, and I didn't know how to reconcile the two. I loved my daughters more than life itself, and the thought of breaking their family apart was unbearable. But I also couldn't imagine giving up Marcus, who had become my escape, my drug, my proof that I was more than just a tired teacher and overwhelmed mother. It was in November that everything began to unravel, though I didn't realize it at the time. Michael's behavior had become increasingly erratic. He'd always been predictable, coming home at the same time, following the same routines. Now he was a wild card, showing up when I least expected it, leaving without explanation. And most disturbing of all, he seemed happy about it. There was a lightness to him that I hadn't seen in years, as if he was enjoying some private joke that I wasn't in on. Marcus noticed my increasing distress. Our conversations became dominated by my concerns about Michael, analyzing his every move, trying to decipher what was happening. Marcus grew frustrated with what he saw as my obsession with a man I was supposedly planning to leave. We had our first real fight when he accused me of still being in love with Michael, and I couldn't honestly deny it. The truth was, I was confused, guilty, and terrified of losing everything, but unable to stop the train wreck I'd set in motion. The weekend before Thanksgiving, something shifted dramatically. I came home from what I'd told Michael was a school planning meeting but had actually been with Marcus, and found him in our living room looking through old photo albums. Not just looking, but studying them with an intensity that made my heart race. When I asked what he was doing, he looked up at me with eyes that seemed to see right through my lies and said he was just remembering better times. The way he said it, the emphasis on better, felt like a loaded gun pointed at my chest. That night, he suggested we go away for the weekend, just the two of us, leave the girls with my sister and reconnect. The timing felt suspicious. In 20 years, he'd never spontaneously suggested a romantic getaway. Was this a test? An attempt to save our marriage? Or something else entirely? I agreed, partly out of guilt and partly out of fear of what would happen if I didn't. But that weekend never came. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, the atmosphere in our home was so tense you could cut it with a knife. Thanksgiving dinner was a special kind of torture. Hosted both sets of parents, maintaining the facade of a happy family while I felt like I was suffocating. Michael was unusually attentive, touching my shoulder, refilling my wine glass, complimenting the meal I'd spent all day preparing. His parents commented on how wonderful it was to see us so happy, and I wanted to scream at the irony. That night, after everyone left and the girls were asleep, Michael pulled me close in bed for the first time in months. But instead of feeling like reconciliation, it felt like goodbye. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I was going to end things with Marcus. The guilt was eating me alive, and Michael's behavior was making me paranoid. I needed to focus on my marriage, my family, my real life. When I told Marcus, his reaction was worse than I'd anticipated. He accused me of using him, of never being serious about us, of wasting over a year of his life. The conversation devolved into tears and accusations, with him finally telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe I was, but I knew I needed to try to save my marriage, even if it might already be too late. December arrived with an unusual cold snap that seemed to mirror the chill in my home. I threw myself into Christmas preparations with a desperate energy, trying to recreate the magic of past holidays. I shopped for perfect gifts, decorated every inch of the house, planned elaborate meals. If I could just make everything perfect enough, maybe we could find our way back to each other. Michael watched my efforts with an expression I couldn't read, sometimes helping, sometimes disappearing for hours without explanation. The girls sensed the tension, despite our best efforts to hide it. Olivia, always my sensitive one, asked me one night if Daddy was sick again because he seemed different. Emma, now 13 and too perceptive for her own good, was more direct. She asked if we were getting divorced like her friend Ashley's parents. I assured them both that everything was fine, that the holidays were just stressful for everyone, but the lies felt like poison on my tongue. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was cleaning out Michael's office, trying to organize things as part of my perfect holiday preparations, when I found something that made my blood run cold. A business card for a divorce attorney, tucked inside a book about starting over after betrayal. Hands shook as I held it, my mind racing. How long had he known? Was he planning to leave me? The thought that he might have discovered my affair and been planning his exit while I was trying to save our marriage was almost too much to bear. I confronted him that night. Unable to keep the discovery to myself, I held up the business card and asked him point blank if he was planning to divorce me. His reaction was not what I expected. He laughed, not a bitter laugh or an angry laugh, but genuine amusement, as if I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. He laughed so hard he actually sat down on the floor, tears streaming down his face, while I stood there feeling like I was losing my mind. When he finally composed himself, he just looked at me, shook his head without saying a word, kissed my forehead, and walked away. That night, he slept in his office. The next few days were agony. I walked on eggshells, afraid that any moment he would present me with divorce papers. Marcus kept texting, begging me to reconsider, but I deleted his messages without reading them. I needed to focus on whatever was happening in my marriage. Michael, meanwhile, seemed almost cheerful, going about his daily routine as if that bizarre confrontation had never happened. He even suggested we go Christmas shopping together, something we hadn't done in years. 5 days before Christmas, the packages started arriving. Not at our house, but according to what I heard later, at the homes of family and friends. Beautifully wrapped boxes with no return address, delivered by various shipping companies. My sister called me, confused, saying she'd received an early Christmas gift but wasn't sure who it was from. My mother-in-law mentioned the same thing. Even some of my colleagues at school received mysterious packages. Everyone was told not to open them until Christmas morning. December 23rd was when I noticed Michael's wedding ring on his dresser. He'd never taken it off in 20 years, not even for surgery. When I asked about it, he said his finger was swollen and it was uncomfortable. But his hands looked fine to me. That night, he worked late again, coming home after midnight. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard him moving around the house, the quiet sound of drawers opening and closing, footsteps on the stairs. It felt like he was saying goodbye to the house, to our life together. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh snowfall that made everything look deceptively peaceful and pure. We went through our traditional routines, attending the morning church service, visiting Michael's parents for lunch, preparing for Christmas morning. The girls spent the evening with friends, planning to return late. It was just Michael and me for dinner, a quiet meal where we talked about everything except what was really happening between us. He opened a bottle of wine, the expensive one we'd been saving for a special occasion, and I wondered if this was his idea of a Last Supper. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace, watching the lights twinkle on the tree. For a moment, it felt like old times, like we were the young couple who'd fallen in love all those years ago. Michael reached for my hand, and I let him take it, feeling the familiar calluses from his weekend projects, the warmth I'd taken for granted for so long. He told me I looked beautiful in the firelight, and I started to cry. Not dramatic tears, just a quiet overflow of all the emotions I'd been holding back. He wiped them away gently and suggested we go to bed. That night, we were intimate for the first time in months. But it wasn't making love, it was something else entirely. There was a desperation to it, a finality that made me feel hollow afterward. Michael held me briefly, then excused himself to shower. I lay there in our bed, in the home we'd built together, surrounded by the life we'd created, and felt more alone than I'd ever been. When he came back, he kissed me goodnight and turned away. I wanted to reach for him, to confess everything, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. Woke up at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. Not unusual given his recent patterns, but something felt different. There was an envelope on his pillow, my name written in his careful handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a single sheet of paper with just 4 words that changed everything. The note simply said, "Open your Christmas present." On his nightstand was a wrapped box I hadn't noticed before, adorned with a beautiful silver bow. My hands shook as I unwrapped it, dread building with each tear of the paper. Inside was a leather-bound folder, and when I opened it, my world imploded. The first page was a printout of text messages between Marcus and me, dated from the very beginning of our affair. Every sweet nothing, every lie about where I was, every intimate detail we'd shared, all there in black and white, but it was the sticky note attached that made my blood run cold. It read, "This is just the beginning. Check your email." I ran to my laptop, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. My inbox contained a single new message from Michael, timestamp showing it was scheduled to send at exactly 3 a.m. The subject line read, "The truth about our marriage." With shaking fingers, I clicked it open. The email was brief but devastating. It informed me that copies of the enclosed documentation had been sent to our parents, siblings, close friends, my school district's HR department, and Marcus himself. It also mentioned that divorce papers had been filed, and I would be served after the holidays. He ended with a PS that said he'd moved out and not to try to contact him, as he would only communicate through his attorney going forward. The attachments were extensive. 14 files chronicling every aspect of my affair in excruciating detail. Phone records showing the thousands of texts and hours of calls between Marcus and me. Screenshots of emails where I'd lied about school events to meet him. Even photos I hadn't known existed of us together in various locations. The thoroughness was breathtaking. He'd known everything for months, maybe even a year, and had been methodically building his case while I thought I was being so clever. I tried calling him immediately, but his phone went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. I ran through the house, only then noticing all the things that were missing. His clothes, his personal items, the family photos from his office, even his coffee mug. He'd been slowly moving out right under my nose, and I'd been too caught up in my own guilt to notice. The realization that he'd been planning this for months while I agonized over whether he suspected anything was almost too much to comprehend. The next few hours were a blur of humiliation and despair. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. as people on the East Coast woke up and opened their packages. My mother was first, her voice a mixture of disappointment and rage I'd never heard before. My sister called crying, unable to believe what she was reading. Michael's parents, who had always treated me like a daughter, left a voicemail saying they were devastated but understood Michael's decision. The worst call came from my principal, informing me that the school board would be meeting after the holidays to discuss the situation, as relationships between staff members were strictly prohibited. By the time the girls came home around 10 that morning, expecting Christmas breakfast and presents, I was a complete wreck. I tried to hold it together, to give them some semblance of a normal Christmas, but Emma took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. When she asked where her father was, I broke down completely. Through tears, I had to explain that Daddy had left, that Mommy had made terrible mistakes, and that our family was changing. Watching their faces crumble, seeing the trust in their eyes replaced by confusion and pain, was the worst moment of my entire life. Olivia, my sweet 9-year-old, kept asking if Daddy left because she'd been bad, if he was coming back, if we could call him and say sorry. Emma, old enough to understand more, asked me directly if I'd had an affair. The fact that my 13-year-old daughter even knew to ask that question broke something inside me. I couldn't lie to them anymore, so I simply said yes, I had hurt their father very badly, and he had every right to leave. Emma's response was to walk to her room and slam the door, while Olivia clung to me, sobbing. The social media explosion began around noon. Michael hadn't posted anything directly, but others had. My mother-in-law, always active on Facebook, posted a cryptic message about truth coming to light and prayers for her son and granddaughters. Friends who had received packages began unfriending me en masse. My sister posted a long message about betrayal and family values that was clearly directed at me. Within hours, my carefully constructed life was in ruins, exposed for everyone to see and judge. Marcus called repeatedly, having received his own package. His voicemails progressed from confused to angry to panicked as he realized the implications for his own career. The school board's policy was clear, and we were both facing termination. His final message was brutal, telling me I'd ruined his life, that he'd given up everything for someone who was never serious about leaving her husband. The irony that we were both now losing everything wasn't lost on me, but I was too numb to process it fully. Over the next few days, I learned the extent of Michael's preparation. He'd not only documented the affair, but had strategically prepared for the divorce. Bank accounts I didn't even know existed, meticulous records of household expenses, even a detailed parenting plan that showed him as the stable parent, while painting me as someone who'd prioritized an affair over family. His lawyer, when I finally received the official papers, was one of the best in the state. I'd been completely outmaneuvered by the man I'd underestimated for years. The house felt empty and wrong without him. Every room held memories that were now tainted by my betrayal and his calculated revenge. I found little notes he'd left behind in strange places. Inside my jewelry box, taped to the back of our wedding photo, even inside my favorite coffee mug. Each one contained a single word or phrase. Consequences. Truth. 14 months. The precision of his revenge was both impressive and terrifying. My daughter's reactions evolved as the reality set in. Emma refused to speak to me for days, communicating only through written notes about basic needs. When she finally did talk, it was to ask if she could live with her father. That request shattered what was left of my heart. Olivia alternated between clinging to me and asking when Daddy would come home. She had nightmares about our family disappearing, about being left alone. Both girls started therapy after the new year, but the damage to their trust, especially Emma's, felt irreparable. The professional fallout was swift and brutal. The school board met on January 3rd, and both Marcus and I were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Given the evidence Michael had provided, the outcome was predetermined. We were both terminated by the end of January, our teaching licenses under review. 20 years of building a career, a reputation as a dedicated educator, gone because I couldn't keep my marriage vows. The humiliation of clearing out my classroom while former colleagues averted their eyes was almost unbearable. Finding new employment proved nearly impossible. In a suburban community where everyone knows everyone, my scandal was widespread. References were reluctant, and background checks revealed the termination for misconduct. I finally found part-time work at a learning center 2 towns over, making a fraction of my former salary. The financial pressure added another layer of stress to an already impossible situation. The divorce proceedings were a masterclass in preparation meeting consequence. Michael's attorney presented the 14 binders of evidence with clinical efficiency. Text messages where I'd called our marriage boring, emails where I'd lied about my whereabouts, credit card statements showing purchases at hotels. My attorney, decent but outmatched, advised me to accept Michael's terms rather than go to trial where the evidence would become public record. The terms were harsh but fair, considering. The house would be sold, proceeds split. Joint custody of the girls, though they could choose where to live when they turned 14. No alimony for either party. I would keep my car and personal belongings. Our 20-year marriage reduced to a division of assets and a parenting schedule. Marcus disappeared from my life as suddenly as he'd entered it. After the termination, he moved back to Chicago where his family lived. His final communication was a letter through his lawyer warning me not to contact him, that I'd done enough damage. The man I'd thrown away my marriage for, who'd promised we'd face anything together, abandoned me the moment things got difficult. The fantasy I'd constructed around our relationship crumbled, leaving me to face the reality of what I'd sacrificed for an illusion. Spring arrived with the finalization of our divorce and the sale of our family home. Watching new owners move into the house where I'd raised my daughters, where I'd thought I'd grow old with Michael, was another kind of death. I moved into a small apartment closer to my new job, trying to create a space that felt like home for the girls when they visited. But the every other weekend schedule felt wrong, unnatural. I'd gone from being a full-time mother to a part-time presence in their lives. Emma chose to live primarily with Michael as soon as she turned 14 in May. The rejection was expected, but still devastating. She was cordial during our visits, but maintained an emotional distance I couldn't bridge. Olivia continued splitting time between us, but even she seemed more relaxed at Michael's new place. He'd rented a house in our old neighborhood, maintaining stability for the girls while I'd been forced to relocate. Another smart move in his strategic dismantling of our life together. Through all of this, I couldn't help but admire the thoroughness of Michael's revenge, even as I lived with its consequences. He'd taken his pain and channeled it into a methodical plan that left me with exactly what I deserved. Nothing more, nothing less. There was an elegant justice to it that I would have appreciated if I wasn't living through the aftermath. He'd given me what I'd given him: betrayal, humiliation, the loss of the life we'd built together. Summer brought unexpected challenges. Michael began dating, according to the girls. Someone from his office, age-appropriate, who was kind to them. The jealousy that flared surprised me with its intensity. I had no right to feel possessive, but watching him move on while I dealt with the wreckage I'd created was painful. Emma mentioned how happy he seemed, how he smiled more. The subtext was clear that he was happier without me. My own attempts at dating were disasters. The single men in my age bracket either knew my story or Googled me and discovered it. One date actually told me he could never trust someone who'd cheated on a 20-year marriage. Another was only interested because he thought I'd be easy, given my history. After a few humiliating experiences, I stopped trying. Some consequences, I was learning, last forever. The first anniversary of what I now thought of as the Christmas revelation was approaching, and with it came a deep reflection on everything that had transpired. I'd lost my husband, damaged my relationship with my daughters, destroyed my career, and alienated most of my family and friends. All for what? For 14 months of excitement with a man who ran at the first sign of trouble? The equation was so imbalanced, it would have been laughable if it wasn't my life. I started therapy in September, finally ready to face the why behind my choices. My therapist, a kind woman who didn't judge despite knowing my story, helped me unpack the layers of dissatisfaction, entitlement, and poor decision-making that had led to my affair. We explored how I'd felt unseen in my marriage, how the routine of daily life had made me vulnerable to attention from someone new, but she also helped me own my choices, to stop making excuses and face the reality that I'd had other options. I could have communicated with Michael, sought marriage counseling, even asked for a separation. Instead, I'd chosen deception and betrayal. The holidays loomed with a dread I'd never experienced before. This would be my first Christmas alone, as the girls would be with Michael. He'd been generous, offering to let me have them Christmas Eve, but Emma had requested to stay with him. Olivia felt torn. I could see it, but ultimately decided to stay with her sister. I spent Christmas Eve serving meals at a homeless shelter, trying to find meaning in service to others. Helped, but returning to my empty apartment afterward was one of the loneliest moments of my life. Christmas morning, I received a text from Michael, the first direct communication since he'd left. It was a photo of the girls opening presents, their faces lit with joy. The message simply said, he thought I'd want to see they were happy. It was both cruel and kind, giving me a glimpse of the family Christmas I'd forfeited while reminding me of my outsider status. I stared at that photo for hours, memorizing their faces, wondering if they'd thought of me at all. The new year brought unexpected shifts. Emma started responding to my texts more, sharing little details about school and friends. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. Olivia began asking if she could spend extra nights with me, missing our old bedtime routines, small victories that I treasured. I also received a letter from one of my former colleagues, expressing sympathy for how public my humiliation had been while still acknowledging the wrongness of my actions. It was the first compassionate communication I'd received from that world in over a year. Work at the learning center became more fulfilling as I invested myself fully in it. Without the distractions of an affair or the energy spent on deception, I rediscovered my love of teaching. The children I tutored didn't know my history. They just knew Miss Sarah helped them understand math or reading. There was redemption in those small moments of breakthrough, in being useful again in the way I'd always been meant to be. Spring of the second year brought another surprise. Michael reached out about Emma's upcoming 15th birthday, suggesting we plan something together. His email was businesslike but not unkind. He proposed a joint dinner, presenting a united front for her special day. I agreed immediately, grateful for the opportunity to be included. The dinner was awkward at first, but by the end, we'd found a rhythm of co-parenting that felt sustainable. Emma even hugged me goodbye, the first real embrace in over a year. That small opening led to more cooperative co-parenting. School events, doctor's appointments, decisions about summer camps. We navigated them together with increasing ease. Michael never forgot what I'd done. The careful distance he maintained made that clear. But he also didn't weaponize the girls against me. His revenge had been complete and devastating, but it hadn't extended to poisoning our daughters against their mother. For that grace, I was profoundly grateful. In therapy, I worked on forgiving myself while never forgetting the lesson. My therapist helped me understand that living in perpetual self-punishment wouldn't undo the damage, but would prevent me from being the mother my daughters needed. Slowly, I began rebuilding not the life I'd had, but a new one built on honesty and authenticity. I volunteered at a literacy center, joined a hiking group, and started taking art classes. Small steps toward becoming someone I could respect again. The second Christmas after the revelation was markedly different. The girls split the holiday between us, and while it wasn't the family celebration of old, it was peaceful. Emma gave me a handmade card, the first in 2 years, with a message that simply said she was trying to forgive me. I cried over that card, understanding the effort it took for her to write those words. Olivia, now 11, gave me a photo album she'd made of our mother-daughter moments from the past year. Evidence that we were building new memories despite the broken foundation. Michael and I achieved a functioning co-parenting relationship that occasionally included moments of the friendship we'd once shared. During a parent-teacher conference for Olivia, we laughed together at her teacher's description of her dramatic storytelling abilities. For a moment, it felt like we were a team again, united in our love for our daughters, if nothing else. He mentioned his girlfriend had moved in with him, and I managed to congratulate him with genuine warmth. Progress. Looking back now, I can see the terrible perfection of Michael's revenge. He'd given me exactly what I'd given him: a complete dismantling of trust, the humiliation of exposure, the loss of the life we'd built. But he'd done it with a precision that was almost surgical, removing me from his life while ensuring our daughters still had their mother. He'd destroyed me professionally and socially, but hadn't tried to take the girls from me entirely. Even in his revenge, there was a measured fairness that I had to respect. I often think about the email he sent with the evidence, how he'd known for months and chosen to wait. He could have confronted me earlier, perhaps saved our marriage through counseling if I'd been shocked into ending the affair. But he'd chosen complete destruction instead, and I understood why. Some betrayals cut too deep for repair. Some trust, once broken, can never be restored. He'd needed to ensure I felt the full weight of consequences, and he'd succeeded completely. The woman I am now, 3 years after that devastating Christmas morning, is fundamentally different from the one who thought she could have it all. I'm humbler, more honest, more appreciative of simple, trustworthy relationships. My life is smaller in many ways. I rent a modest 2-bedroom apartment instead of owning a 4-bedroom house. I tutor struggling students instead of teaching full classrooms. I spend every other weekend with my daughters instead of tucking them in every night. But within those constraints, I've found a different kind of peace. I've learned that some mistakes can't be undone, only lived with and learned from. The affair cost me everything I thought I valued: my marriage, my career, my reputation, my full-time motherhood. But it also taught me about the weight of choices, the importance of integrity, and the devastating ripple effects of betrayal. I share my story not as an excuse or a plea for sympathy, but as a cautionary tale. Affairs aren't romantic escapes from boring marriages. They're nuclear bombs that destroy everything in their blast radius. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my choices, please stop. Whatever you think you're missing in your marriage, whatever excitement you're finding elsewhere, it's not worth the devastation that follows. Talk to your spouse, go to counseling, even separate if necessary, but don't betray. The temporary high isn't worth the permanent consequences. Your children's trust, once broken, may never fully return. The life you've built, once exposed as a lie, crumbles completely. And the person you become in the aftermath has to live with the knowledge of what you're capable of, what you chose over everything that truly mattered. Michael has moved on, building a new life with someone who hasn't betrayed him. He seems happy in the glimpses I get during exchanges and school events. There's a lightness to him that I remember from our early days, before life got complicated, before I complicated it further with my selfish choices. I'm genuinely glad for him, even as I mourn what we had. He deserved better than what I gave him, and now he has it. My daughters are resilient, as children often are, but they bear scars from my choices. Emma, now 17, has high standards for relationships and openly discusses her trust issues in therapy. I know I contributed to that wariness, and it breaks my heart. Olivia, 13 now, still asks sometimes why I did what I did. I give her age-appropriate honesty, owning my failures while assuring her it had nothing to do with her or her sister. Both girls have learned too young that parents are fallible, that love isn't always forever, that trust requires constant nurturing. As for me, I continue the work of rebuilding and redemption. Not to win anyone back or restore what was lost, those ships have sailed, but to become someone worthy of my daughter's eventual forgiveness and my own self-respect. I date occasionally, always with complete honesty about my past. Some men run, and I understand. Others appreciate the hard-won wisdom and genuine remorse. I'm in no rush, having learned that loneliness is preferable to deception. The approaching fourth Christmas since the revelation feels different, lighter somehow. His girlfriend graciously extended the invitation, understanding the importance of family traditions for the girls. It won't be comfortable, but it's progress. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices at any number of crucial moments. if I'd been more patient during Michael's recovery, if I'd declined that first coffee with Marcus, if I'd ended the affair immediately instead of letting it continue for over a year. The what-ifs can drive you crazy if you let them, but I try to focus on the what-nows instead. What now can I do to be a better mother? What now can I contribute to make amends for the destruction I caused? What now will help my daughters trust and love again despite my failures? The story I've shared isn't unique, unfortunately. Affairs happen every day, destroying families and futures with depressing regularity. What might be unique is the calculated precision of Michael's revenge, and my willingness to acknowledge that I deserved every bit of it. He took his pain and transformed it into a plan that ensured I experienced every emotion he'd felt: betrayal, humiliation, powerlessness, loss. It was brilliant in its comprehensiveness and devastating in its execution. To those who might judge him harshly for his revenge, I offer this perspective: he gave me numerous chances to come clean. The months he spent gathering evidence were months I could have confessed, sought forgiveness, tried to repair the damage. Instead, I continued lying, continued betraying, continued believing I was clever enough to have my cake and eat it too. His revenge was proportional to my betrayal, methodical where mine was emotional, honest where mine was deceptive. The truth about affairs is that they're not really about sex or even love. They're about ego, about believing you deserve more than what you have, about the thrill of being chosen by someone new. They're about running from problems instead of facing them, about taking the easy path of excitement over the hard work of maintaining long-term intimacy. They're about selfishness dressed up as romance, destruction masquerading as passion. I know because I told myself all the pretty lies, and I'm living with all the ugly truths. If there's redemption in my story, it's in the afterward. It's in the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust with my daughters. It's in the honest conversations with other women who are standing at the precipice I once jumped off, urging them to step back. It's in the acceptance that some consequences are permanent, some forgiveness may never come, and that living with integrity going forward is the only amends I can truly make. This Christmas morning, as I join my former family for breakfast, I'll carry with me the weight of choices made and unmade. I'll watch my daughters laugh with their father and his girlfriend, and I'll swallow the jealousy that she gets to be part of their daily lives while I get scheduled visits. I'll make conversation with the woman who has the life I threw away, and I'll be grateful she's kind to my children. I'll thank Michael for including me, knowing he does it for our daughters, not for me. And in quiet moments, I'll remember that long ago Christmas morning when my world exploded, when the gifts under the tree included the devastating truth wrapped in beautiful paper. The morning when consequences arrived special delivery, changing everything forever. It was the worst day of my life, and also the day my real education began. The education in what matters, what lasts, and what can be lost in just 14 months of selfish choices. The coffee maker works perfectly in my small apartment, brewing the same brand I've drunk for 20 years. But every morning, as I pour that first cup, I remember the broken machine that started this story. Sometimes the universe gives you signs. Sometimes you're too caught up in your own desires to notice. And sometimes, by the time you understand the warning, it's already too late. But even then, even after everything is broken and exposed and seemingly beyond repair, there's still the possibility of building something new. Not better necessarily, certainly different, but honest and real in a way the old life never was after the betrayal began. And maybe, just maybe, that's its own form of redemption.